I've got yet another shining star from India all the way here in the Silicon Valley. It is indeed my pleasure to be joining Vinod Khosla, the very, very iconic Vinod Khosla. Thanks very much, sir, for being with us. You've just come back from India. You're here for the Prime Minister's dinner, which is all about digital India, which is startup India, and all of that. I do not want you to talk about whether there is merit or demerit in all of this, but you've been an entrepreneur, you're an investor. I want you to wear both those hats for me and dissect the startup scene back home in India before we begin talking about the lessons that we can learn from here.
Well, as I discovered last week when I was visiting in India, it's a very active startup scene. There's a lot of interesting companies, but probably more than anything, there's great role models in companies like Flipkart and Snapdeal and Paytm and many, many others. I met with a lot of entrepreneurs, and it was pretty exciting what's going on. So the ecosystem is developing very well on its own.
The ecosystem may be developing well, but a lot of people also believe that for the startup scene to boom in India and to be meaningful and to be impactful, there are three big fault lines that exist. I will talk about the first fault line, that there is way too much interest around the consumer internet space. It perhaps needs to move to the enterprise space. Is that a concern you share?
I think it's starting to happen in all areas. You know, one area can serve as a role model for entrepreneurs in other areas. Obviously, consumer startups are the easiest and least expensive usually to get started. They may take a lot of money later on, but usually you can run a startup experiment very, very cheaply. In some of the areas, like enterprise, it takes much more money, more of a direct sales force, more people calling on enterprises and corporations. And so I think that will follow naturally if a few successful role models happen.
Mr. Khosla, I appreciate the fact that you're talking about successful role models, but are you at some point concerned about the kind of money that's chasing some of these startups? A lot of people believe there is way too much money that's corrupting the startup space, and way too much money is chasing very few companies. 80% of the investment is going only into about 20% of the companies in the startup space.
You know, whether it's way too much money or not, that's the responsibility of the investors, not the entrepreneurs. If I were a smart entrepreneur, I'd take advantage of the money chasing me. And I think good entrepreneurs will take advantage, raise the money, and then spend it judiciously. So that's what a good entrepreneur does. Whether investors make money or lose money depends on how much money they put in, at what valuations. And it's a natural part of the investment cycle. When there's a big opportunity, too much money floods in, there's overinvestment, then there's underinvestment. Those are natural cycles in every part of the world. As an entrepreneur, I would not worry about it.
You wouldn't worry about it. Would you worry about?
As an investor, the investors have to learn to be cautious. But there are very large opportunities.
Has caution been thrown to the window in the Indian startup space right now?
I have not been there enough to tell you whether it has or hasn't. I actually don't have an opinion. There's some silly journalistic headlines saying that I said some things were overvalued. That's not true. I'm not in a position sitting here to judge. What is very clear to me is the opportunities are very, very large and will justify large investments.
I have a last question of you before I let you go, sir. When you look at the Silicon Valley and you look at the startup and the investment scene here, there is a value chain. There is an idea that comes up, it's incubated, it's nurtured, VCs handhold firms, and then of course the bigger guys take interest and there are acquisition opportunities. Something like this does not happen back home in India. That's point number one. And point number two also is that Silicon Valley has a culture of celebrating failure as much as they relish success. Again, something that doesn't happen too much in India. From a government point of view, and because Mr. Modi is here to not just, take lessons, but also discuss opportunities, what is it that you think the governments need to watch out against in terms of the two things we spoke about?
Well, what governments can do have much better electronic infrastructure, faster internet, better policies. The recent opening up of payment banks and other banks is a good idea. Electronic infrastructure will encourage more startups. That the government can do. Should the government be investing? I don't think so. What else can the government do? You can encourage new role models. Now, every system when it starts can't be mature, and the Indian system isn't mature yet, but it'll happen. It takes time. It'll take 10, 15 years for it to become as vibrant. It took 20 to 30 years for the Valley to become a vibrant startup ecosystem.
We'll need a few Vinod Khoslas there to make it far more vibrant. Before I let you go, you've said something very profound. You said the government doesn't really need to be a part of the investment cycle. But, the budget talks about a seed fund. The budget talks about entrepreneur fund. You think that is something that the government needs to watch out against? Does it distort the level playing field in some sense?
I'm not that worried about distorting the level playing field, but I don't think budgets of the government for investing are necessary. I think that's generally a bad idea, and most governments in most parts of the world have been through here, tried it, and most of them have failed. Very few have done it successfully. So I personally don't think it's going to help very much, but if the same money spent on making it easier to do business, easier electronic infrastructure will make a big difference.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.